You smell that, friends? Autumn leaves in the air, pumpkin spice everywhere, and gallons upon gallons of fake blood from the horror movies the cinemas have given us over the years. Hello, it's me, your host, Simon Dexter, welcoming you to a new program on the channel, my top lists. I don't like calling them top 10s because sometimes I can't think of 10. Sometimes I think of more than 10. So top lists seem more fitting. And what better way to introduce the program, and in my first October on YouTube with a functioning computer no less, than with my top 9 favorite horror movies of all time. Now why only 9, you ask? Could I not think of 10? Well, the answer to that is quite simple. Finding 9 horror movies I liked and still fit my criteria so I don't seem like a total fucking hypocrite was a total chore. But yes, as with most top lists online, I will be following a certain set of rules. Rule 1, obviously 1 movie per franchise, which shouldn't be difficult for me because I sort of fall under the mentality that the first movie in every franchise is the best anyway. Rule 2, straight horror only. Although this does include thrillers and sci-fi, it does not include musicals, comedy, or horror aimed at children. That's for another list, maybe farther down the line. And finally, this isn't really a rule, but I feel it should be said anyway. This is all my opinion and my opinion alone. If you don't agree with me, that's perfectly fine. If we all agreed on everything, then life would be really boring. However, should I not put your favoritist horror movie on here, or worse, put a movie you absolutely hate and think is overrated on here? I apologize, but there is nothing I can do about that. That's just my taste. And just one final warning. I have very loose lips, so there might be possible spoilers. Spoilers, 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 spoilers. If I see one person bitch after I warn them there were spoilers about spoilers, I swear to God I will hunt you down and fucking end. Now I know not everyone is going to agree with me on this one. That's fine, it's totally fair. That's why it's at number 9 to begin with. However, you can say everything you want, you can beat your chest till the cows come home. When you hear a chorus of creepy kids, or you see kids just acting peculiar, eerie, and out of place, you always feel just a little unnerved. And bar none, no movie got this better to me than the classic Stephen King story Children of the Corn, particularly the 1984 adaptation, as that one is my favorite. For those of you who are unaware of what Children of the Corn is about a town out in one of those mid-eastern states where all the farming is done, where all the children gang up on every adult in town and slaughter them, thereby taking over said town. It's kind of a horrifying prospect if you think about it. I know what some of you are thinking, oh, they're just kids, why didn't they just fight them off? It's because the kids were smart and organized about it, which is the scary part to me. Because this was based in a time where, or it's based in an area as well as the time, where after church, everyone in town goes to the same place for a cup of coffee. Well, who's waiting those coffee shops, do you think? Teenagers. So, teenagers are handling drinks where they can put poison into them. And even then, they lock all the adults in there and slaughter them with farm equipment. Now why would the kids do this, you all cry out? Well, simple really, because one boy in particular led all the kids to the cornfields while the adults were at church and preached to them the word of the man behind the rose. Who is that? Doesn't explain it too much. But yeah, this whole story is about kids getting fanatical about some fake prophet's words and killing their parents over it. Think about that. If something like that happened now, like some loon just took all the kids and managed to convince them that there's like this other god and that other god commands them to kill their parents, and they were organized about that. I couldn't. Fuck it. Game over, man. Game over. Now, I don't think it'd be possible here, of course, but in that small town, in that era when there wasn't a bunch of social media, that's a really horrifying idea, and it was brilliant. Stephen King thought that out so well. And believe it or not, I'm actually not spoiling anything for you, because that's not the whole movie. That's the beginning of the movie. The rest of the movie follows a couple that discovers this wayward town with no adults. And that's when things get interesting. And some of my favorite things about this movie aren't even just the idea, but honestly there are so many good things about this movie. Like, the acting is solid, even from the kids. The kids are amazing in this movie, even though I think the one who plays the main evil kid, Isaac, is actually a small adult. Like a dwarf or something. But he still does a really good job. And I don't know. The big reason it's not very high on the list, though, is the ending. The ending ruins everything. I'm not going to spoil the ending, don't worry about that. But it's really campy and it totally spoils the mood, but honestly it's an 80s flick, so I'm not too shocked. It was a low budget 80s flick at that, but... And even with all that, I still highly suggest you watch it. I actually think you can find it for free on YouTube somewhere. Maybe. And if you don't like that, there's like 100 remakes. I haven't actually seen them, so I couldn't tell you if they're good or not, but I bet they are actually better. I just know I prefer the older one. And I leave you with these final words. He wants you too, Malachi. He wants you too. Ah, Friday the 13th. What bigger epitome of the slasher flick is there? Think about it. How many times is Friday the 13th, spoofed on other things? Like, there's always a crazy guy killing hot teenagers in a hockey mask. Like, seriously, it's everywhere. And this entry is doubly fun because I have some trivia for you guys. And this might actually stump some of your friends who are real horror buffs. So, but you have to word it exactly like this if you want your desired results. So, who is the main killer in the entire Friday the 13th franchise? Is it A. Jason Voorhees, B. a mongoose, or C. other? To those of you who picked B, glad you're easily amused. To those of you who picked A, sorry, you're still not entirely correct. Now, this is where the spoilers are coming in, mind you, so if you don't want this, maybe skip ahead. But, yeah. I know some of you are already seeing through my guys. You're already rolling your eyes at me, sighing, saying, it's a trick question. Everyone knows that Jason wasn't the killer in the first movie. Mrs. Voorhees was. Duh. Well, you're part right. Because, yes, it's a trick question, and yes, Mrs. Voorhees was the killer in the first movie, but, let's talk about a little man named, Roy Burns. Now, this is your third warning. I'm about to get into some spoiler territory. If you really don't want to know something about a movie that aired like 20, 30 years ago, skedaddle. But, in Friday the 13th Part 4, Jason actually technically died. Kind of. So in Part 5, he actually didn't come back. It was a copycat killer by the name of Roy Burns, who was, I believe, the son of a victim in the previous movie. He lost his mind and took on a Jason disguise. Now you can actually tell because his mask is a little different. In most movies, Jason's hockey mask has the 3 red arrows pointing here and here, where Roy's is only 2 blue arrows pointing up the cheeks. So, the answer to the question is not trick question, there are 2 killers. The answer is trick question, there were 3. Now, do I really need to explain why Friday the 13th is on this list? Do I really? Well, I suppose some elaboration why the first one in particular is. To be frank, Mrs. Voorhees is actually one of the better killers in all of original slasherdom. I don't think slasherdom is a word, but we're going with it. Because frankly, most killers you've seen are just crazy guys, but she was a crazy woman, which you don't see too often, and her motive is beautiful. She's just angry because couple camp counselors who were supposed to be watching her special needs son were too busy fucking somewhere else while he was getting bullied and then drowned in the lake. Drowned? It's actually not very clear if he actually died in the lake or not, seeing as I find it weird that he died as a child but still managed to grow up. Never made sense to me. And honestly, for a fucking old-ass horror movie, it makes camping so much more unnerving when you think someone might just be pissed enough to use your seclusion against you. I put 7 at 7. It should not be legal to be this funny. All jokes aside, 7 is more stepping into thriller territory. This is a very different type of horror we're talking about here. Now, ever since I was fairly young, I've had an interesting, I don't like to say obsession, but fascination with the 7 deadly sins. And when I heard about 7, I was all over that shit. Now, this does have a lot of crime drama mixed into the whole mesh, but it is at its core what I would consider a horror movie, because the basic premise is a man overly fascinated with the 7 deadly sins, more fascinated than me, mind you, decides to kill people who have these sins in ironic ways. In other words, this was Saw before Saw was a thing. And it's just got ace performances from A-list stars. It's got Morgan Freeman, Kevin Spacey, Brad Pitt, and that ending, I won't spoil it, it's so prolific you have to experience it for yourself. So go out there and go watch it. I will warn you though, it does start off really fucking slow, and Brad Pitt is super annoying in it. But it's worth it, I promise you. Though I could just be speaking from my pride, which is the most powerful sin of them all. Now we get into some serious shit. Dead Silence is such an underrated horror movie. It breaks my little heart. Oh. Dead Silence was directed and partially written by James Wan, who is a genius, by the way. It follows the story of Jamie Ashen, who loses his wife suddenly and tragically through murder. But not just any murder. She had her tongue ripped from her skull. And the weirder part being is it happened right after they receive a mysterious package with a ventriloquist dummy inside. Fuck are you looking at? This then reminds Jamie of an old ghost story from his hometown that tells of Mary Shaw. She was a famous ventriloquist in an older time, and after certain events, she gets killed. She gets her revenge from beyond the grave. And if anyone screams in front of her, she takes their tongue. Painfully by the looks of it. It was always a solid movie with really good writing and a brilliant idea. The acting could be a touch hokey here and there, but what horror movie doesn't, to be honest with you? I don't know. Go watch it. I think you'd like it, but maybe it just resonates with me in particular because it feeds on a phobia I have, which is of dolls. Isn't that right, Slappy?